Thank you for tuning in to Community Chat. As you know, this particular program is designed to help better inform folks about a lot of different things that are going on. I mean, the title itself, community, and that is to inform folks, educate people, get the word out there, and use it through different conversations that we have with different guests. Right now, the crisis that we're going through, COVID-19. Unprecedented times that we are living at this particular time. Joining us for this important conversation, he is the school superintendent in Abington Public Schools. Peter Schafer joins us for this conversation to kind of get the gist of everything since the onset of COVID-19, what has been done, and maybe kind of a peek to what the future is. Peter, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Kevin, I appreciate you gave me the chance to do this with you, that you contacted me and set this up. We want to be connected with the community. It's our responsibility to make sure the community knows, what we're doing and what's going on. And this is a great opportunity to do those things.
For folks who don't know, I mean, this all kind of started to take place. The conversations were taking place in early March. You kind of walk us through when you first started hearing about the coronavirus, COVID-19, and the possibility that folks were going to have to start practicing. I mean, 2020 is forever going to be known. If you think of two words, social distancing, so we're forever going to, 2020 will be tied to that particular phrase. When did the conversation start? Not only in the Abington School District, but maybe conversations that you might have had with other school districts as well.
So it's good for me to reflect on this too. The first part of March, the first 2 weeks of March, we were really, as individual districts, looking at different foreign travel that some of our kids had participated in, or different circumstances with families that maybe have had some sort of exposure. And we were all individually making these decisions. And I remember the evening that we had a report of a parent who did not have COVID, but they were working in a place where it was suspected that someone else did. And it became our responsibility to close just based on that. And we were going to it's as ridiculous as this sounds, we were going to wash everything. That family was going to be isolated just to make sure they were okay. And then we were all going to come back, pretty much after the weekend. And we haven't been back since, because what happened very rapidly was that the governor's office began to shut us down, and you know the rest of the story. And now we're shut down for the rest of the school year.
What is that like? I mean, again, you make the efforts to say, okay, let's kind of see if we can have this family quarantine. Conversations with other districts, maybe we should kind of close schools for a couple of weeks, and then the state steps in, and there's kind of a mandatory, okay, we're going to close things, and it's a date set. What were the conversations like then, when it's like the state steps in? Is there more of a relative unknown when the decision's not in the school district's hand and it's in the state's hands as to if in fact you're going to return?
Well, the devil is in the detail, and when you have the responsibility for the life, health, and safety of individuals, though that list of details doesn't end, because once you've come up with the details that you need to concern yourself with to keep and protect people, you go to bed at night and you continue to try to find more and think of more, and sometimes you're stressed because I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a medical expert. I defer to those people. And so relying heavily on our local health agent, Marty Golightly, who's been outstanding, by the way, for his advice and his recommendations. a sounding board, his ability to coordinate and connect the different town departments. You see people rise to the occasion in the most difficult times, and that's what I see a lot of people doing. And so the thinking that goes into it when prior to the state, to get back to your question, prior to the state really taking control over our schedule was, okay, we're going to sanitize it. We're going to isolate this family. That's the right thing to do. We're going to sanitize everything. That's the right thing to do. We're going to bring people back, and then we're going to monitor conditions. And then we're going to send kids home and communicate with families and get them immediately to pediatricians. We've got masks in nurses' offices, and students are going to be isolated with masks if they are showing signs. So we were coming up with all of those strategies and plans. And then really everyone, all of us, the ground shifted, and we all lived it together to this period of time where it's not a week to week or a day to day, but now it's a longer term closure.
And I think it's worth noting is that while you may be looking at the academics of it, there's so much more that was affected besides just what was going on in the classroom. There's so many activities, not only things that are ongoing, but things that are planned. You look at, the basketball team, the boys basketball team, the varsity team, get ready to go to a championship game, which I think many of us in, Green Wave Nation would think that it was a cinch that they were going to come away, but instead now they're co-champions. So the sports are affected, and any other things that are moving forward. You get almost the start of the spring sports season, and then you talk about prom. I mean, what has it been like? What was it like to deal with those secondary activities instead of academia?
I said this in one of my letters to our parents, that one of the things that we knew that this has made even more clear to us is that schools are not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the connections that our elementary students have with their teachers and with each other, and sitting in a classroom and the experience of being in a classroom and learning from each other, the social piece, the interactive piece, especially in a world where we're already overly connected to devices, where the routine, the schedule, and the interactions provide part of that, who we are in our development. I mean, we're a collection of our experiences, and now we're limiting all these experiences. But those experiences are those field days, those field trips, the trip to Washington, D.C. For our middle school, the field days for our elementary school. We had a play that was canceled. I mean, the kids that were working in the play, I mean, they're up till every night for weeks. They're up till 9, 10 o'clock at night working, whether they're building the set or they're performing in the play, or they're behind the scenes, more behind the scenes with not only scenery, but also the costumes. I mean, it's a team, and it's this, all the work that went into it, and we're proud of those things, and they're so important in the lives of our students, and now it's just canceled. I want to talk about our senior class, those rites of passage that we've all experienced growing up together before they go off to college. That's tragic. Not to have those moments in their senior year. So we're going to do absolutely everything we can to recreate, repeat. So for the earlier grades, there's a lot we can't wind the clock back. But what we can do is we can be aware of whatever need they may have when they return. Be thoughtful about that. Try to measure what they might need as a group and as individuals. Replicate, redo a lot of those things in subsequent over subsequent time. We have that time with those students, And for the students that are leaving us that are seniors, we are pushing back those activities like graduation. We can't replicate going to the Garden to do a state championship game, but we can have a graduation at some point and make a plan for that. And those are the things that we are working on. So as we work on those things, nobody knows what condition we will be in a month or 2 months or 3 months. So the only thing I know for sure is that we will do everything that we can to provide those students those experiences that we all have had and that we want them to have. And to be honest, as a community, we want to celebrate those rites of passages with them because we're proud of them. And that's going to be healthy for us too when we get back. It's not only healthy for those students, it's going to be healthy for the community, for their parents, for the grandparents, when we get back to some sense of normalcy. And I know we don't know what that normalcy might look like, but I do know this. We're not going to live like this forever. And we will get back to some brighter day and some sense of normalcy at some point. We just don't know necessarily what that looks like today.
Just a quick note to kind of digress into your comment was Steve Shannon and the great work that he did in regards to directing and putting together Mamma Mia. I know that they did have a couple of rehearsals. It's worth noting that one of Abington Cam's interns, Emily Christian, was actually doing. I actually had a project she was working on, where she was kind of doing. She was documenting the behind the scenes of what it's like to put together a production like that. So I'm hoping she was able to capture enough footage to be able to put that together, and then maybe we could share that with the folks here in Abington. Moving forward, talking a little bit about, you're in a situation where you're like, okay, we don't know when we're going to return, but we don't want these children, we don't want our students to fall back. When did the discussion start talking about remote learning and putting together a plan to make sure everybody had proper equipment, or putting a laptop in someone's hands? I know that Rich Bykowski has done some great work with the IT department, and you've got other faculty members who are involved. Kind of discuss that a little bit.
I appreciate the question. So when we started, it was a short-term closure. And so what we did was, working with the teachers for the first 2 weeks, we provided learning opportunities that were really self-directed. They were focused on the strands and standards from the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks that, by grade level and by subject area. So we really hung on the internet these different resources for people to use and access. So then we were closed for a longer period of time. So then in the following week, remotely, teachers trained, teachers worked hard in administration and other staff members to acclimate themselves to create remote learning for the following weeks. I think that the work that's been done by our administration, faculty, staff under these circumstances, I'm very proud of. I'm lucky to be able to work with these people because, again, while everybody knows what it's like in their house and they know how chaotic it is, and during these chaotic times in their homes, they committed themselves to the professional development and the planning over a very short period of time to deliver remote learning. And so now each day, students are provided a half day of academics with check-in times with teachers and office hours. And the learning is both synchronous, means the teacher's live on a camera, and asynchronous, means it's a recorded piece, which is really the flexibility that we need, because it has to be one size fits all. It has to be right for both the educator and the families, because let's say the teacher's on every single morning or every couple of times at 9 a.m. and it doesn't work for families at 9 a.m. So that recorded piece is a benefit. so that people can access it. The families are given a weekly schedule of what the assignments and the work will look like, so that we realize in households, people have challenged their schedules, so they can do it as they're able to. And all of the subject areas are providing that work to all of our students remotely during this closure period. You can't make up being in the same room. You can't make that experience up. But the benefit is the reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of the other, music and art, PE, health, wellness. They're all at work. They're all important, but being engaged in learning during a time period when there's a lack of routine and lack of structure and a lack of connectedness with the outside world is important for individuals in terms of mental, intellectual, social health. And so those connections are important. We also have our guidance counselors, adjustment counselors, and school psychologists are still working. Special education teachers are still working with our students because, every community has diverse needs. Our students have diverse needs. And so remotely, we're doing everything that we can to meet all of those needs every week.
While we have a moment to have a discussion here, this is probably a chance for anybody who is viewing, especially if it's a parent of a student. What are you hearing from faculty and teachers in regards to some of the challenges that they're facing? And maybe there's something on the student's end, maybe a parent that could help assist with the betterment of the remote learning process.
So there's a list of challenges with this. Although I think it's going well overall, and we are trying to meet the needs of diverse learners, a lot of it is one size fits all, and it just has to be because it's remote learning. And some families have challenges that we can't all understand. We may have a family where the parents are both emergency responders or working in the medical field, and they're not home. Or when they are home, there's a list of things going on in a household and making sure that junior is doing their algebra may not be on that list. And so we have to be careful to support and engage to the extent that we can, and yet not make people feel who are in a circumstance like I just described, like they're dropping the ball, because maybe they're doing everything they can. And we want to support them. So we're following up, we're checking, we're doing everything we can to support people without trying to push them to a point where it's not helpful to them. We also have kids that are getting into colleges who are in AP classes that need extremely rigorous, supportive, interactive work with our teachers, because we do not and we will not let our kids be at a disadvantage to other systems. Now, everybody in America is going through this at the same time, but we're going to make sure that in Abington, our kids are well served in these challenging times and those purposes. So we also have to take care of those. And so what I'm hearing a lot of is the amount of remote engagement in terms of follow-up with emails and communications can be very overwhelming. And because we care, you don't want to drop any of those balls. You want to follow up. And so these days we have, I think, like everybody else, sort of blend in with each other. I feel very lucky. I've been coming into my office, but it's because I'm isolated here. And this is where the materials and all of the things I need to support this are. So I am practicing the social distancing and I'm safe. But in homes, everything's blurring Tuesday is Wednesday, and it may be Tuesday at 6 o'clock at night, and it feels like it's Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or vice versa. So all of these ways that educators are sort of wondering, but also just the same way it is that everybody working from home. That was a very long answer.
No, but it was, I appreciate how you articulated it. It was important for you to do so. At the time of this conversation, we're just less than a week from that announcement that I think a lot of school districts were expecting, and that is Governor Baker saying that all the schools for the remainder of the school year, the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year, will remain closed. What was it like to hear that? And yeah, I know you had a school committee meeting that evening, and it was kind of somber. Would that be a good word?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me that personally, because I gotta, I'm just going to answer for me. I was anticipating it, yet I was, so I wasn't surprised, but I was so disappointed. I mean, I knew it was coming, but yet it was sad, and then kind of angry, and I knew it was coming. We all knew it was coming. But it's frustrating, and it's as much as you wanna, as much as you're working hard and you think you're doing good work, you can do better, but you can't, because they're not coming to school, and so it's frustrating.
It's a good answer. So we're looking and we're hoping that there can be something done when it comes to the senior class of 2020. Graduation. Are there any early conversations as to what the approach will be, or is that still in the developmental stages?
So a lot of districts, including Abington, are looking at beginning of August, hopeful sort of graduation ceremonies, things like that. Mm-hmm. That's very tentative. Some of the challenges around that are our kids are going to orientations at colleges later because of this situation, or at least that's what the college's plans are. And so, we then we're going to miss those kids. So there are no perfect answers to this. It's still all being planned. Then I go back to something we talked about earlier, and the backdrop is we don't know what August looks like. So, that's what's being worked on at this point.
If I could ask you this personally, and you were very frank in regards to hearing that announcement by Governor Baker, and I kind of felt the same way. There was that a little glimmer of hope that maybe come that May 4th date, that maybe there would have been some, okay, we're going to push this off maybe another week or two, and then maybe we'll resume. But then when it came out, you're right, there was kind of a disappointment. Do you look forward? Do you look ahead? Do you look at the 2020-2021 school calendar year and hope that it'll happen as normal? Or do you have to have a tentative plan in place saying, what do we do to be, do we want another school year to be affected?
Personally, sometimes I can think so optimistically that I can convince myself that it's going to be okay.
Right.
And personally, I tell myself, how much longer can we do this as a society, as an economy? I mean, I know this is what we need to be doing, even though I don't like it. But I look ahead to months ahead, and I mean, we weren't built. Our supply chains, the items in the grocery store, just, they don't get there magically. Truck parts, car parts, furnaces, you name it. They don't just, the world can't take 3 months off or a year off and things are going to work. So some normalcy has to occur at some point. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Okay. Well, and so we've talked about the academics. We've talked about some of the extracurriculars and how those have been affected. Let's not forget, and you're talking about normalcy. In order for you to be able to be a school district, we have to talk about finances. You have to talk about, and what are the ramifications? How has the pandemic not only affected the remainder of the fiscal year 2020 budget, but how is that having an effect on putting together a budget for the next fiscal year, 2021?
We are accounting and managing each dollar according to function. So however it's spent, if it's something that's a result of this pandemic, we're tracking it. There will hopefully be the opportunities to recoup some of those dollars through either the state or the federal government. Because we're so far along in the school year and the majority of our budget is payroll, and that money is there and people are working, this year, this budget, we'll be okay. We'll track, we'll meet our obligations, and conserve to the extent possible. We also have expenses we didn't anticipate. We've got people that, paid for preschool who aren't paying for preschool. That creates liability because those teachers, we still have students with special needs in the preschool, and those teachers are still providing service. So the payroll is they still need to be paid. There are certain unanticipated liabilities, and there are certain anticipated savings, and we're checking all those balances as we go. So for next year, we're on hold, and we are hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. And if we have to get into a scenario where we are level funded or there's a decrease, we're beginning to think about and look at those types of things and what that might mean. To go too far into that without knowing how deep that might be is irresponsible. And so right now I can tell you from the state and the federal government, there's no information that's good information on what that might look like. So the federal government right now is looking at another phase of relief, and one of the things they're looking at in this phase of relief are the states, because state governments all across our country have been providing their support of all of the services that we require and that we need from our state without the tax dollars coming in. So that's the next phase of the federal discussion. And at the state level, Abington has had a tremendous benefit that we've been supported by the community, and we built a new building. And what it's meant is, with the things that have been going on here, we've had an increase in our student population. And with that comes dollars. And so, however the Chapter 70 money that funds education rolls out to Massachusetts, we are hopeful that we will be in a better light, based on that. But that's a hope, and we don't know what that number is until we get it.
Yeah, it's worth noting, and I was going to ask you, because knowing that the state, they were in the middle of deciding, talking about, I believe House 2 was on deck, as you had the House Ways and Means Committee. They were going to start discussing it, and that's kind of been put on the back burner. Let's not forget the law that was signed last year, the Student Opportunity Act. I think probably the one thing I would ask is, did Abington stand to gain anything from that? And is that something that's also that is going to have to be pushed off until we get past this health crisis?
We substantially benefited from the Student Opportunity Act and the new funding for education. We don't know how we know that that's still a priority with the legislature, but we don't know what dollars they have for it now. So we submitted our plan, and we'll wait and see what they tell us about that. And I hope we don't have to redo it, but let's face it, we're going to redo it.
Yeah, sure. You're talking what, $1.5 billion over 7 years. It'd be interesting to see how the state tackles this. Well, we're at that point of our conversation where I asked you um, if there's anything that we haven't touched upon or tackled, whether it's a topic or two that maybe you want to touch upon, and maybe it could generate future conversations in future programs.
I need to personally, after talking about all this, just say how much I appreciate our doctors and nurses and our emergency responders for the work they're doing for us. And, you know, this has been stressful, and I'm so lucky to be distracted by something like this that I think is so important, because it's just the next most important thing to life and death. They are dealing with life and death and the stress on themselves and their families. And I just be wrong not to say that, not to feel that way and not to say that.
Well, we thank you for the opportunity to at least talk with you, at least at this point in time during the COVID-19 crisis, the pandemic, and welcome more conversations, hopefully when we're on the other side of this, when the curve has been flattened more so, when we have more answers. I would love to have you back on here on Community Chat.
I appreciate this, and I appreciate the chance to do that going forward.
Excellent. And we thank you very much for tuning into this program. And if you have any ideas or any conversations that you want to hear while we are all in this together, the COVID-19 pandemic, info@abingtoncamp.tv if you have suggestions, forecasts, information that you want to see and hear on this station. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, have a good day.